My son-in-law handed me a cup of tea the morning after my daughter's birthday and said, very casually, like he was commenting on the weather, that they'd been thinking it might be time to put my name on something. I held that cup and didn't say a word. 43 years I spent driving a refrigerated truck up and down State Highway 1, and I have learned that silence is sometimes the only honest thing a man can offer. My name is Noel Beckett. I am 67 years old, and I live alone now in the house I built with my own hands on the outskirts of Levin. Not grand by anyone's measure, 3 bedrooms, a long veranda that catches the westerly off the Torero Ranges, a workshop out back that smells of old machine oil and the camphor blocks my wife used to tuck into her winter coats. My wife, Maureen, passed away 4 years ago. Bowel cancer. 7 months from diagnosis to the end. I still reach for her on cold mornings before I am properly awake, and then I remember, and the day starts a little harder than it should. My daughter Adele is 39. She lives 20 minutes from me, in a newer place out near Ohio, with her husband Terrence and their 2 children, my grandson Flynn, who is 12 and already taller than his mother, and my granddaughter Pippa, not the Pippa in the list, a different girl entirely, my Pippa, who is 8 and has her grandmother's way of tilting her head when she is thinking something she is not yet ready to say. Terrence works in insurance. Middle management, something to do with claims processing. He drives a leased Mazda CX-5 and wears the same 4 polo shirts on rotation. I have never disliked him. I have also never quite trusted him, the way you don't quite trust a gate latch that looks fine but has a wobble you can feel if you push it right. For most of the years since Adele married him, 14 years now, I kept my reservations to myself. It is not my place to decide who my daughter loves. Maureen used to say that, and she was right. What I watched instead was how he treated her, how he spoke to the kids, whether the house was a happy one when I arrived unannounced on a Saturday with a bag of tomatoes from the garden. Mostly, it seemed fine. Mostly. The morning in question was the Sunday after Adele's 39th birthday. She had organized a dinner at a restaurant in Levin, nothing too fancy, just a long table at a place on Oxford Street that does good lamb rubs and keeps the house wine cold. About 12 of us. Her friends, her brother Darren who drove up from Wellington, my sister Bev and her husband, and me. Terrence sat at the head of the table and talked about interest rates for longer than anyone needed him to. I paid for the whole dinner. Not because anyone asked me to, I had simply told Adele weeks earlier that I would like to shout the table for her birthday. It came to just over $800. I put it on my EFTPOS card without blinking. She is my daughter and she turns 39 once. The next morning, a Sunday, I drove over to drop off a gift I had forgotten in the rush of the night before. A small gold locket that had belonged to Maureen. I had had it cleaned and restrung. Adele did not know I was coming. I let myself through the side gate as I always do and knocked on the ranch slider. Terrence answered. He was still in his dressing gown, holding a coffee, and something moved across his face when he saw me, not surprise exactly, more like a man who has just been handed a cue he was not expecting this early in the morning. Noel, he said. Good timing, actually. I've just put the jug on. Adele was at the kitchen table in her pajamas, hair still loose from sleep, and she looked up at me with a smile that was warm but had something behind it, something careful. I noticed it the way you notice a sound in an engine that is not yet loud enough to name. I gave her the locket. She held it for a long time without speaking. Then Terrence sat down across from me, laced his fingers around his mug, and said the thing he said. That they had been thinking. That it might be time. That they wanted to put my name on something. I asked him what he meant. He said it slowly, like a man who has rehearsed it. The house, he said. Their house. Adele's and his. He said they had been looking at the numbers and things were tight right now with the new repayment rates and it would mean a great deal if I could come on as what he called a co-borrower. Just on paper. Just to help the bank feel competent. He said it would cost me nothing. He said it would just be my name. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at the locket in her hands. I have been inside enough conversations to know when one has been planned and when one has not. This one had been planned. The timing of it, the morning after I had spent $800 on her birthday dinner, while I was still warm from the night before, while the locket was still in her hands, that was not an accident. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I asked Terrence how much the mortgage was. He told me. It was $460,000. I drank my tea. Outside, Flynn was kicking a football against the fence in slow, rhythmic thumps, and a two-way was making an unholy racket in the kowhai by the letterbox. The kitchen smelled of toast and the particular warmth of a house that has been slept in. Everything was ordinary. Everything felt ordinary. And yet something had shifted in the room, the way light shifts just before a southerly comes through, barely perceptible, but unmistakable once you have lived long enough to know it. The thing you need to understand is that my house in Levin is mortgage-free. Has been for 11 years. I paid it off early, working long haul through winters that would strip the skin from your knuckles, saving in the years when Maureen and I did not go on holidays, when we drove the car until it became genuinely dangerous and then bought second-hand. It is not a spectacular house. But it is mine, entirely, and there is a kind of dignity in that which is hard to explain to people who have not spent their lives earning it slowly. Terrence knew this. He had known it for years. I set my cup down and looked at my daughter again. She finally looked up from the locket. Her eyes were not quite meeting mine, they were landing somewhere near my shoulder, the way they used to when she was a teenager and had done something she was not proud of. "Dad," she said. "It would really help us." And then Terrence leaned forward slightly and said something that I have been sitting with ever since. He said that of course, if anything were to happen to me, and he said it in that quiet, reasonable voice of his, the insurance voice, the arrangement would protect the family. He said that my name on the mortgage would mean the asset was connected to me in a formal way. He said there were also some other documents they had been talking to their financial advisor about. Other documents. I asked him what documents. He smiled. He said we could go through them when I had time. That there was no rush. That it was all very straightforward. I looked at my daughter one more time. She was turning the locket over and over in her fingers, and she did not say another word. I stood up, thanked them for the tea, said I needed to get back to feed the dog. I do not have a dog. I said it anyway. Driving home along the Ohio Road with the Tarawa Ranges filling the windscreen and the paddocks pale gold in the late morning light, I kept thinking about one thing. Not the mortgage. Not the documents. Not even Terrence's voice going through those practiced sentences. I kept thinking about Adele's eyes. About where they had been looking. About what it means when your daughter cannot quite meet your gaze while her husband asks you to put your name on $460,000 of debt. I have carried a lot of things in my 67 years. I have carried grief that made me feel hollowed out at the center. I have carried tiredness that went all the way to the bone. I have carried the particular loneliness of a man who comes home to a quiet house and sets one plate on the table. But I have never, in all of those years, felt what I felt on that road home that morning, a cold unsettling suspicion that the person I was most afraid of losing had already, in some quiet way I had not yet understood, begun to let me go. 3 days passed before Adele rang me. I had been in the workshop those 3 days, sanding back an old Rima table I had been meaning to restore since Maureen died. There is something about working with your hands that keeps the mind from running ahead of itself. You focus on the grain, on the direction of the stroke, on whether the surface is coming up even. The table could not ask anything of me. That suited me fine. When the phone rang and I saw her name, I let it ring twice before I answered. Not from anger, I want to be clear about that. From the same instinct that makes a man check the ground before he steps. Dad. Her voice was bright. Deliberately bright, the way it gets when she is managing something. How are you? Are you eating properly? We talked for several minutes about nothing. Flynn's school project. The pukiko that had been getting into her garden. Whether I had watched the rugby on Saturday. Normal things. And I let her lead it, Because I know my daughter and I know that she moves toward difficult things sideways, like a ship correcting course gradually so the passengers don't feel the turn. Eventually she said, Terrence was wondering if you'd had a chance to think about what he mentioned. I said I had been thinking about it, yes. She said they were just in a bit of a bind with the new interest rate structure and the repayments had gone up and it was all just very stressful. She said it quickly, all of it running together. I could hear something in the background, dishes, I think, or the kids. I said, Adele, I'd like to understand the documents he mentioned. The other ones. A pause. Just half a beat, but it was there. He can explain all that, she said. It's just standard stuff. Asset protection. It's what people do. Whose assets? I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad, don't be like that. I did not say anything. We're your family, she said. We're not trying to do anything to you. We're just asking for a bit of help. That's what families do, isn't it? I told her I would come over on Thursday and we could sit down together and go through whatever Terrence had in mind. I told her I wanted to read whatever documents existed before anyone discussed anything further. She said that sounded great. She sounded relieved. I did not feel relief. I felt the way I used to feel when a load had shifted on the truck and I could not see it, but I could feel it in the way the vehicle was sitting. Thursday came. I arrived at 2:30. The children were at school. Terrence was home, which surprised me. He had taken the afternoon off, he said, which told me immediately that this was not a casual kitchen table conversation. There was a folder on the dining table. Buff-colored, the kind with a clip inside. He had printed things out. I sat down. Adele made tea she did not drink. Terrence sat across from me and opened the folder and began explaining things in his insurance voice, measured, patient, the voice of a man accustomed to making complicated things sound routine. What he was proposing was not simply a co-borrower arrangement. There were two documents. The first was an application to add me to their mortgage as a guarantor, not just a name, but a guarantee secured against my property. My house. The mortgage-free house in Levin that I had spent my working life paying for. If they defaulted, the bank could come after my home. The second document was a power of attorney. Broad in scope. It would give Terrence, not Adele, the authority to act on my behalf in financial matters should I become, as the document phrased it, unable to manage my own affairs. I sat with that for a moment. The folder was open in front of me and I could see the pages and the places where they wanted my signature, each one marked with a small adhesive arrow, orange, like the flags they use on real estate signs. This isn't what you described on Sunday, I said. Terrence nodded, as if I had said something reasonable that he had been expecting. I know it looks like a lot on paper, he said. But think of it this way. You're 67, Noel. You live alone. If something happened to you, a fall, a health event, anything, someone needs to be able to step in and manage things. This just makes it official. I manage my own affairs perfectly well, I said. Of course you do, he said. Right now, absolutely. But it's about planning ahead. It's about protecting you. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her hands. The locket I had given her was around her neck. I noticed that, and I am ashamed to admit that it made the moment harder. That small gold oval against her collar. Her mother's. Adele, I said. Is this what you want? She looked up. Her eyes were wet at the edges. I just want everything to be sorted, she said. I just want to know we're all safe. Safe from what? I asked. She did not answer that. Terrence said, look, we've talked to a financial advisor. A proper one. This is all above board. We wouldn't be bringing this to you if we didn't think it was the right move. What's the financial advisor's name? I said. He said a name I did not recognize. I asked for the advisor's contact details. Terrence said he would dig them out. He did not move to dig them out. I closed the folder. I told him I was not signing anything that day. I said I wanted to take the documents home, read them properly, and have someone I trusted look them over. I was thinking of my solicitor. A woman named Roberta Vance, who had done the conveyancing on my house 20 years ago and who I had used for Maureen's estate. Sharp, no nonsense, the kind of person who reads the fine print as a matter of course. Terrence's expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. The patience thinned a little at the edges. The thing is, he said, we're actually up against a bit of a deadline with the bank. They want an answer by the end of the month. The end of the month is 3 weeks away, I said. There are processing times, he said. It needs to be initiated before the end of next week, realistically. I looked at him. That's a very short deadline for a decision of this size, I said. I know, he said. Believe me, I know. But that's just the way the bank has structured it. We didn't set the timeline. I took the folder. I told them I would be in touch. Adele walked me to the ranch slider and stood there in the afternoon light with her arms folded against the breeze, and she looked so much like her mother in that moment that it cost me something to keep walking to my Uda. Dad, she said. I turned. Please don't overthink this. I nodded and got in the Uda and drove home. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold and the folder open in front of me. I read every page. I am not a lawyer, but I have signed enough contracts in my working life to understand what I am reading when I read it. What I was reading was not, as Terrence had described it, standard asset protection. The power of attorney was what a solicitor would call a general enduring power of attorney. Broad enough to cover property, investments, bank accounts, everything. Terrence had filled in his own name on the nominated attorney line. Not Adele's. His. And the mortgage guarantee was not a small thing quietly attached to a loan application. It was a full recourse guarantee. If they could not make repayments, for any reason, not just hardship, the bank's first avenue of recovery after their property would be mine. I sat there for a long time. I have loved Adele since before she was born. I have driven through the night to be at her hospital bedside. I have fixed every leaking tap in every flat she ever rented. I sat with her through her miscarriage before Flynn, the one she did not tell anyone about except me, and I held her hand and said nothing because sometimes nothing is the right thing. She is my child. She will be my child when I am in the ground. And yet, I thought about her eyes on Sunday morning. About the way she had not been able to look at me while Terrence talked. About the locket going around and around in her fingers. About the word she had used just now, safe. I want us all to be safe. Safe from what? I closed the folder. The next morning I rang Roberta Vance's office and made an appointment for Monday. I did not tell Adele I had done this. On the Saturday, Darren rang me. My son. He lives in Wellington, works for a transport logistics company, sensible steady man, not given to drama. He rang at 9 in the morning, which is not unusual, we talk most Saturdays. But within 2 minutes I understood that this call was not the usual one. Adele rang me, he said. I said I had thought she might. She's pretty upset, Dad. I said I imagined she was. She says you're being difficult about helping them out. Bet you've gone cold on them. I told him what had been proposed. All of it. The guarantor arrangement against my house. The power of attorney with Terrence's name on it. The deadline that was apparently immovable. Darren was quiet for several seconds. The power of attorney is in Terrence's name, he said. His name, I said. Not hers. His. Another silence. Dad, he said, and his voice had changed. The easy Saturday morning tone was gone and something careful had replaced it. Don't sign anything. Not a thing. Not until you've talked to someone. I told him I already had an appointment with Roberta Vance on Monday. He exhaled. Good, he said. Good. Has Adele said anything to you about? He stopped. About what? I said. Nothing. I'll talk to her. You just keep that appointment. Darren, I said. What were you going to say? It's nothing, he said. Just keep the appointment. He rang off not long after. I sat with the phone in my hand in the kitchen with the morning light coming in flat and white off the ranges, and I thought about what he had started to say and had not. Has Adele said anything to you about what? I thought about that all weekend. I thought about it on Sunday when I drove past their street on the way back from the Levin New World and told myself I was not going to turn in, and did not turn in. I thought about it at night, lying in the quiet of the house that Maureen and I had built, in the bed that still has her side even though I have slept in the middle of it for 4 years. On Monday morning I was in Roberta Vance's office on Bath Street by 9 o'clock. She read both documents without speaking. She has a way of reading that is completely still, no expression, no sound, just her eyes moving down the page. It took her about 15 minutes. Then she set the folder down and looked at me over her glasses. How long have they been planning this, do you think? She said. It was not the question I had been expecting. I said I did not know. She said, because this power of attorney hasn't been drafted in the last 2 weeks. This language, this structure, someone has put thought into this. A solicitor has put thought into this. She tapped the folder. This is not a template someone downloaded. This is a document that has been prepared with a specific intention. I asked her what she thought the intention was. She looked at me steadily. The intention, she said, is control of your assets. While you are still alive, and certainly upon any diminishment of your capacity. She paused. Has anyone been talking to you recently about your health? About your memory? About needing help around the house? I thought about that. And then something surfaced that I had not thought about in the context of any of this. A conversation 8 or 9 months ago, when Adele had come over for a Sunday roast and had commented that the back section looked overgrown and had I thought about getting someone in. And then another time, around Easter, when she had asked whether I was keeping up with the bills all right, whether I found the online banking confusing. And I had thought she was being kind. I had thought she was being a daughter. Mr. Beckett, Roberta Vance said. Are you all right? I told her I was fine. I was not fine. She told me what she recommended. I listened. I took notes on the small notepad I carry in my shirt pocket, the one I have carried for 40 years out of habit. When she had finished, I asked her one more question. I asked her whether, in her professional experience, this kind of arrangement, when a child became involved in something like this, was typically the child's own idea, or whether it usually came from someone else. She looked at me for a long moment. In my experience, she said carefully, it is rarely entirely the child's idea. I drove home. I did not stop anywhere. I sat in the driveway for a while with the engine off, looking at the house I had built, at the workshop out back, at the kowhai that Maureen planted the year we moved in, which is taller now than the guttering. My phone buzzed. A text from Adele. It said, Dad, Terrence says the bank needs an answer this week, not next. Can you please just trust us on this? I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and sat very still in the quiet of my own driveway, and tried to find the line between loving someone and losing yourself to them. It is a thinner line than anyone tells you. And I was standing right on it. I did not reply to the text that day. I made dinner, corned beef and mashed potato, the same meal I have made on Monday nights for longer than I can remember, because habits are a kind of anchor when everything else is moving, and I sat at the table and ate it and tried to think clearly. Roberta Vance's voice kept coming back to me. Not the legal advice. The question she had asked. Has anyone been talking to you about your health? About your memory? I kept turning that over. That night, around 9 o'clock, Darren rang again. He did not waste time. He said, "Dad, I need to tell you something and I need you to hear it before you make any decisions." I told him to go ahead. He said that 2 weeks before the birthday dinner, 2 weeks before Terrence had sat down with me over that cup of tea, Adele had rung him. She had been crying. She told him that Terrence had come to her with a plan. She said the word plan the way you say it when you mean something else, something that has no better word yet. Terrence had found a financial advisor through a contact of his from work. And what this advisor had laid out for them, in a meeting that Adele said she had not fully understood until it was already over, was a structure that would, over time, consolidate the significant asset in the family. My house. My savings. The small managed fund I had built up over the last decade. The plan was that by the time I was no longer able to manage things, and Terrence had apparently been quite specific about this, had talked about probabilities and averages and the statistics of cognitive decline in men over 65, everything would already be in a framework that he controlled. Adele's name was on some of the documents. But the control, the actual decision-making authority, was structured to flow to him. Adele had rung Darren because she did not know what to do. She loved Terrence. She also loved me. And somewhere in the middle of that she had lost the thread of where one thing ended and the other began. Darren had told her she needed to tell me. She had said she couldn't. He had said she had to. And then, this is the part that tightened something in my chest, she had said, what if he thinks I was in on it from the start? She was not afraid of losing my house. She was afraid of losing me. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear and said nothing for a long moment. "She's not a bad person, Dad," Darren said. "I know that," I said. She got turned around. "He's good at that. Turning things around until they look like something reasonable." I asked Darren whether he had spoken to her since Monday. He said he had, that morning. He said she was in a bad way. He said she had told Terrence on Sunday night that she was not going to go ahead with it. That she wanted her father's name off every document. He said the conversation had not gone well. I thanked him. I told him I would handle it from here. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and thought about a Sunday morning 14 years ago when Adele had rung me from a payphone outside a bar in Palmerston North because Terrence had forgotten to pick her up after a hen's night and she had no credit on her phone and no cash and it was 2 in the morning. I had driven up without complaint. She had fallen asleep in the passenger seat on the way back and I had kept the heater on because she was cold, and I had thought, this man. I had thought it then and said nothing. I had been saying nothing for 14 years. In the morning I rang Adele. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was wrecked, the kind that comes from crying without sleeping, thin and worn through at the edges. "Dad," she said. "It's all right," I said. "It's not," she said. "It's not all right. I should have told you the moment he brought it to me. I should have rung you and told you exactly what was happening and I didn't and I don't." She stopped. "I was scared," she said. "I kept thinking if I could just smooth it over, if I could just make it work somehow, if everyone could just," her voice broke. "Adele," I said. "Listen to me." She went quiet. "I am not angry with you," I said. "I want to be very clear about that." "You should be," she said. "Maybe. But I'm not." I paused. "I am angry with the situation. There's a difference." She cried for a bit. I let her. Then she said, "What do I do?" I told her that Roberta Vance had already drafted a formal withdrawal of my involvement from both documents, which had been sent to the bank and to the financial advisor's office that morning. I told her that no application had been lodged, so there was nothing to undo legally, only the expectation needed to be unwound. I told her that as far as I was concerned, the financial arrangement was finished and we would not be revisiting it. Then I said the harder thing. I said, "The question now is what you want to do about your marriage." Silence. "I can't make that decision for you," I said. "I wouldn't try. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, you have somewhere to go. You have Darren. You have me. You have a house in Levin with a spare room and a kowhai out the front that your mother planted, and the door is not locked. She cried again. Harder this time. Flynn's kind of crying, the sort that has been waiting a long time to come out. When she had steadied herself she said, he told me you wouldn't understand. Bet you'd be too proud to see it was for your own good. That men your age always think they can manage everything and they can't. She paused. I think I wanted to believe him because it was easier than seeing what he was actually doing. I know, I said. You're not like that, she said. You're the most capable person I know. I don't know why I let him make me think. She stopped again. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you are, I said. That's enough. It was not a conversation that fixed everything. Those conversations do not exist. What it was a beginning, the kind that only becomes visible later, when you can look back and say, there, that was where things turned. 3 weeks after that, Adele brought the children to me for a Saturday. Flynn helped me in the workshop. He has his grandmother's hands, wide and steady, good for holding things still. Pippa sat on the veranda with a book and her feet dangling off the edge, and at some point in the afternoon she wandered inside and came back with a glass of water for me without being asked, the way Maureen used to. Adele sat in the garden with a cup of tea and watched the Tararua ranges go from gold to shadow in the late afternoon light. We did not talk about Terrence. We talked about her plans, which were becoming clearer, and about what she needed, which was less complicated than she had believed. She had already spoken to a solicitor of her own. Darren had helped her find one. She's going to be all right. I know this the way I know the weather coming off the ranges, not from certainty, but from years of watching what comes before it. Terrence never contacted me. Not a message, not a call. I did not expect one. Roberta Vance told me, at a follow-up appointment in early June, that the financial advisor Terrence had used had several complaints lodged against him with the Financial Markets Authority. She said it as a matter of record, without drama. I wrote it down in my notepad and put it in the folder with the rest of the documents, and then I put the folder in the filing cabinet in the spare room and closed the drawer. I still have the Rima table in the workshop. Half-sanded. I will finish it eventually. There is no rush. What I know now, that I did not know before all of this, is something I should have learned the first time I drove to Palmerston North at 2 in the morning and brought my daughter home and said nothing. Silence is not always kindness. Sometimes it is just the path of least resistance dressed up as patience. I was so careful not to interfere, so determined not to be the difficult father-in-law who thought no man was good enough for his daughter, that I talked myself out of trusting what I could see with my own eyes. I mistook my restraint for wisdom. It was not wisdom. It was avoidance. The orange adhesive arrows that were on those documents, the ones marking where I was meant to sign, I found myself thinking about them for a long time afterwards. Small and bright and cheerful, pointing at the places where everything I had worked for would have quietly transferred to someone else. They looked so harmless. That is the thing about a slow erosion. It does not announce itself. It just keeps pointing, gently, at the place it wants you to put your name. A man spends his life building something. A house, a small fund, a sense of himself that does not require anyone else's approval. By the time he is 67, that is not stubbornness. That is the result of everything. It is worth protecting. Not from his children, never from them, but for them, and for himself, and for the version of himself that gets up each morning and makes corned beef on a Monday and sands a table back to what it was, and knows that what he has built is still standing. The kowhai is flowering again. Maureen planted it the year Flynn was born, 12 years ago now, and every spring it goes a color that has no name I know of, somewhere between yellow and gold and the particular light of an afternoon that is about to turn. The 2A come for it every morning. They are loud and argumentative and completely unaware that anyone is watching them. I drink my tea on the veranda and let them get on with it. It is, all things considered, a reasonable way to start a day.